Hey, it's Chris McKay, and welcome to another edition of the Hot Country Podcast. The Hot Country Podcast being brought to you in part by Passport America and by Surfshark. For more information on these and other sponsors and discounts available, visit hotcountrypodcast.com. When we return, it's ACM Award winner, singer, songwriter, and author Dave Gibson. He's next on the Hot Country Podcast. And this is kind of a special edition of the Hot Country Podcast. Not only are we still finally getting out of that COVID realm, but we're recording this in May of 2021, so there'll be some references to COVID and how we've all survived. But I have to tell you, bringing to the microphone today is an honor and a thrill. A singer, a songwriter, a performer, winner of the Academy of Country Music, and an author. Well, we'll talk about more of that later. But right now I say, hey, Dave Gibson, thanks for joining me on the Hot Country Podcast.
And it's a pleasure, Chris. I really appreciate you having me part of the show, man.
I've said it 1,000 times. I would love to be a fly on the wall, not to interview or to bother, but just to watch country songwriters work. You know, anyway, you take a whole group of people like that. I would just love to pick your brains and figure out how you do it. I don't want to put you on the spot. Should I read off your long list of number ones, or would you like to share with people who have no idea until this show is over, who is Dave Gibson?
Well, you know, I guess I'm just a hybrid of all kinds of music. I love all kinds of music. When I was growing up in Texas and born in Arkansas, grew up in Texas and back to Arkansas and went to Chicago and had a band and then moved from Chicago to, I'll make this quick, to Nashville in '82. And believe me, I don't know how I did it, but it was timing. Everything was timing for me. I met a guy that helped me to started my career. A guy named Tony Brown, who's one of the greatest producers and piano players. Played for Elvis, and he took me in the studio, tried to get me a record deal, and then my whole songwriting career started. I became not a singer-songwriter, but a songwriter-singer.
Correct. Yes.
For 10 years, Tony Brown cut my first hit back in the first year I was here, which is unbelievable. Called "Midnight Fire" on Steve Wariner.
Steve Wariner, absolutely.
Yes, and that was like I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, because it became the title of the album and the first single. And then he went on to cut 5 of my songs and another hit I had with him called "Heart Trouble."
Heart Trouble, yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't mean to belabor anything here, but Tanya Tucker was my first number one hit.
If it don't come easy.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I never will forget. I was like, man, I made the big time now. She did it on the CMA Awards, which was so cool, And then Confederate Railroad did Queen of Memphis, big song, huge song for me. And Daddy Never Was a Cadillac Kind. Yeah. I was lucky enough to be writing for Alabama, a company, Maypop Music, and they cut a song of mine called Jukebox in My Mind. And it became their biggest song at radio.
It was
the number one and the most country thing they ever did, which is, so anyway, and then about that time, Joe Diffie did one of my songs called "Ships That Don't Come In." And I miss Joe so much. He was my buddy, and it went number one. And I was actually at Sony Music myself, at Epic Records with Blue Miller, and we had a band called the Gibson Miller Band. And this is just a quick run through of everything, so you can kind of get an idea of what's going on. and then Blue and our band won the ACM Award in '93, and then I left the band in '94. Here I am, and I do have a book out.
So here we go. And again, for those who are going, Dave Gibson, when you say the Gibson Miller Band, I have my own classification of my music world as a DJ. I always say that 70s was outlaw, '80s was pop and '90s was hot, and
Yeah.
you and Blue, with the Gibson Miller Band, you took hot country by storm. Interesting on the charts, it was always you would always see the Gibson Miller Band. You had High Rollin', Red White, what was it? Red White Blue Collar, Stone Cold
Yeah.
Country. But my favorite,
Texas
of course,
Tattoo.
well, I was going to say my favorite, of course, is Texas Tattoo. I don't know who the girl is in the video, but as my father would say, hubba hubba, she was just a doll. And you
Oh
guys,
yeah.
and I have to admit, Dave, I had the same mullet in '94, so it just all kind of came together there. And a lot of people may not know that to team the two of you up, and again, we lost Blue Miller in 2018. So
Yes.
I know that's sadness, and my heart goes out to you and the family still. I mean, what a loss to country.
Yes.
What the two of you were able to bring together in, was it just 2 or 3 years, '92 to '95, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, we started in '91, writing and everything, and then Doug Johnson, who introduced us, he became our producer, and became A&R at Epic Records, and took us in as the first act.
Yeah.
So we were. I mean, my whole career has been timing. I don't know how it's happened, but it's been awesome. Really.
Well,
has.
Big Heart, which was released in '92
Right.
or '93. And for those that don't know, Doug Johnson, he was the VP of Epic at the time, right?
Right. Yes, he was.
Ye-
He became head of A&R at Epic. Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing what the two of you did together, and it's surprising it took so long to bring the two of you together between the songwriting and the performing and just the general hot country attitude the two of you had. If you don't mind, I'd like to reflect back on my buddy Danny Shirley. And again, we're recording this in 2021. Just found out just recently that Danny broke his back in an accident, and
Right.
And I want to wish the best to Danny. But for you to write Queen of Memphis and Daddy Never Was a Cadillac Kind, boy, they sold those songs. I mean, that must have been a thrill to turn on the radio and hear that for so long, right?
It was really unbelievable. And a lot of the DJs and people back in the day, people who were interviewing us, asked me why that we didn't cut those songs. Well, it just so happens it was like the timing thing. It was they were out a little before us, and I was writing, mainly. I didn't have a record deal, and so those songs, and believe me, one of my biggest buddies and greatest producers and piano players too was Barry Beckett. And those songs, Barry cut on those guys, and I'll tell you, he's no longer with us, but I tell you, he is in spirit with me because he was an awesome guy, and he made those great records, and Danny Shirley sang the hell out of them. So I'm a very, very fortunate man.
Well, I tell you what, Danny is a great. I have not spoken with Danny in probably 15, 20 years. But I have to tell you, during the time of the '90s, you couldn't throw a stick without hitting a Confederate Railroad CD somewhere. I mean, it was like
all right.
That was the decade I met my wife, and she was teaching jazzercise, and for her, half of their library was part of their dance routines. So,
right.
And between you and Confederate Railroad, again, I'm always going to say that is what made hot country hot country. And then your relationship with Steve Warner, who has always, I mean, I go back to the 80s, what was it, The Weekend, in the 80s, and then into the 90s. And then you did also Don't You Give Up on Love, right, for Steve?
Yes. That's funny because that's one of the songs that Tony Brown had originally cut on me. And it was a song I had written by myself, right before I moved to Nashville from Chicago in '82. Tony couldn't give me a record deal at that point in time, but he was producing Steve, and he said, I need songs for Steve. So that's how wrote the Midnight Fire with Louis Anderson, who I met through Tony. And then the track that Tony had cut on me, Don't You Give Up on Love, Steve heard it and loved the song. And then Tony asked me, he said, would you mind if Steve put his vocal on this track? And I said, are you kidding me? How about yesterday? How about whenever you want it, whenever you want. I mean, I was just blown away. It was awesome.
Well, the relationship you have with those artists, and then a lot, and I'm hoping now, people listening to the podcast are kind of putting two and two together. Just to kind of go in order here as we make our way through time, what would be your favorite song that you penned? Whether you performed it or not, what would be your favorite and what was the motivation behind it?
Ships That Don't Come In.
Amen. There you go.
Yeah, that's my watermark of my career as far as I'm concerned. I've written a lot of songs, but that one and Joe Diffie's performance on that song is, in actuality, I'll just tell you a little side story. Joe actually, his producer, Bob Montgomery, found the song by accident and played it for Joe, and Joe thought it was great. He said, but something, that lyric is pretty heavy. I don't know if that's good for me. Cause he had more, songs like, John Deere Green. I don't know if it came out before, but some Stand Me Up Against the Jukebox, all those things. And he said, I don't know if that's right for me. And Bob said, listen, Joe, go in the studio there and sing it one time. And if you don't want to do it, we won't. And he did. He came out and he said, oh my God. Yeah. We're doing this.
Yeah. And you know what? It's a signature song for him and certainly for you.
Oh, it was unbelievable. I mean, and believe me, my co-writer, I want to mention Paul Nelson is one of the great songwriters in Nashville. He co-wrote with his brothers 18 Wheels and a Dozen Roses. And we were writing another song the day we wrote that. And I wasn't into it. I said, Paul, you got an idea. I know you got an idea in that book of yours.
Yeah.
I want an award-winning song. So he pulled that out, and I don't know where, except from up above, the God just shined down on me and gave me those chords, and I started playing these chords, and we wrote that thing in, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours, and it's just like that. Okay, that's it. I don't know if it'll ever get cut or not because it's got a word in there that no one's ever used in a country song.
Now say the word.
Well, bitch. Say the word and you'll be free.
Yes, just let your soul go. And then, if I get to put you on the spot, what is your favorite song that you did with the Gibson Miller Band?
Wow, that's hard to say. I love them all. Texas Tattoo has got to be one of my favorite. I mean, that whole record, Where There's Smoke, has got so many great songs on it. And I do say that myself because Blue Miller and I wrote most of them, and we had pretty much all of our singles, and we had a writing partnership that was just like, I don't know. Blue used to say, we're like country Lennon and McCartney. I said, well, I don't know if we're that but we're pretty damn good, and Hi Rollin, Texas Tattoo. I love our first single, Big Heart, and Red, White, and Blue Collar. That's one of my favorites.
Well, that means I just have to play all of them, which is in the library anyway. And what I love is the fact when I'll play a song, especially by you guys were like, what do I want to say, the soundtrack of country line dancing people. Every time I would walk into a club in the 90s, Gibson Miller Band was playing. You guys you came in at the right time, in the right place.
Yeah.
And here we are so many years later, and the full circle, understanding what you're doing and where you are. My box of collectibles autographs and promotional items and all the little crazy things that a DJ would have in the trunk of his car. But the one that I prized, and it's still, I'm putting myself on the spot here trying to remember the name of the book, but was a children's book written by Ricky Van Shelton. And I want to say Quacky or Quacker the Duck or something.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember.
And
sure.
It was one of those things where why would a country artist write a children's book? And I read it and I understood immediately after you read it. You don't have to be 5. I mean, you can be 50 and understand where the storyline's going. But but I have to tell you, it's one, Dave, it's one of my prized possessions is an autographed copy of Quacker the Duck by Ricky Van Shelton. So here I go, and I'm gathering my material for Dave Gibson. And what's funny is I was talking to Nikki Nelson of Highway 101, and she said that trying to find yourself on the internet, you can so totally get lost with everything that's out there of what people have written about you. But one of the interesting things as I was going through yours, they kept trying to send me to a Scottish singer, Dave Gibson. And it's like, no, not that one. But what I found interesting, it was completely by accident. I had no idea that Dave Gibson wrote a book, War at the Ice Cream Store, with Mustachio Pistachio versus Bully Vanilli.
Who does this?
Who would write at a ice cream store called the Frozen Frog? So it's like I'm reading this, I'm going, nah, Dave didn't do this. And then I clicked through a couple of more, and it was like, oh my God, Dave did this. And then it was like what you and Cheryl DeVega did is phenomenal. So welcome to the world of authors. And congratulations, here we go. Instead of being an ACM Award winner, hey, congratulations on the book tour. What's that all about?
Oh, thanks so much, Chris. You know that it all started, and believe me, it's just a nutty story. That's one of the lines in the book, actually.
It's a funny story.
You're green and nutty. Who would want to order you anyway?
And so anyway. For those that don't know, it's presented by Frank the Frog, so you have to kind of get into character here.
Right. Well, Chris, I don't know if you know anything about a song I had written many years ago called The Frog Song. If you look up Dave Gibson and The Frog Song, a Scottish songwriter will not come up.
Gotcha.
And I know that guy. Believe me, he's great. But I wrote this wacky little song years ago out of nowhere. I was kind of a little concerned about my career as you know, I hadn't had a hit in a while, and I had this publishing company that I was partners in, and the people there, you know, they were saying, you know, including my ex-wife, she was saying, well, you're not writing the kind of songs that get on the radio anymore. And I was so mad. I was so pissed off that I walked outside.
Oh, no kidding.
Cup of coffee and a cigar, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, I'm gonna write something. I don't care if anybody ever cuts it. I'll cut it.
Yeah.
So, well, that was all well and good. The only problem was I didn't have any idea to save my butt. I start writing this goofy song, and I take it back in about 3/4 finished, and I was excited because I thought it was pretty dang good. And they looked at each other and said, oh, my God, he's lost his mind. Now he's out there writing a song about a frog. We're all mad.
Yeah, Dave's gone off the deep end, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, yeah. No, so to speak, in the water hole, you know.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I finished the song. I brought it back in. And Bob Saporiti, a guy that had worked at Warner Brothers for 25, 30 years, DP, you know, he was working for us at the time. And I came back in and played it, and he said, oh, wow, that's pretty damn good. He said, I'm going to pitch that to Kenny Rogers.
Oh, goodness.
So anyway, Kenny didn't cut it. But that song actually went to #1 in the UK. It did so well over there. That frog turned into a puppet show that's called the Waterhole Bunch, which Cheryl DeVega and I met, and she's a great writer. She and I started this company called Waterhole Productions, and it was all about these puppets in a bar called the Waterhole. You know, that was part of the song. And we worked on that thing for 2 years. It's on Roku TV now.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, it's so funny. There's so many cool little skits, and we did old school puppetry. We built the whole set, but then we did a lot of green screening, and it's just very cool. It's on Spider T, SPYDAR on Roku, 6:30 on Friday night. We're not on demand yet, but we plan to be. Anyway, Frank the Frog is the guy who is the one who is like, he's a spokesperson for all the puppets and everything. So he ended up being the ice cream taster at the Frozen Frog. Cheryl and I came out of nowhere writing this. She had written a little thing and been animated years ago called The Ice Cream Storm. And of course, Frank the Frog, I wrote the frog song. We sort of combined those in a way, and we both love ice cream, you know? And so we started coming up with these characters. Bully Vanilli. The Bully Vanilli is the bully of the ice cream store because he's the most favorite. That's who everybody orders. And he doesn't like the other flavors. He thinks they're, much less than he is, and especially pistachio, you know. It's a funny little book, and it turns out that this book is about anti-bullying, and we didn't even start out to write it like that, you know. But in the end, Bully gets licked. Bully Vanilli gets licked at the ice cream.
Well, I was going to say, there's a fun pun for ice cream lovers.
Oh, this whole book is just full of crazy puns, and that's the reason, adults like the book too, because it's got a lot of humor that can go, it's a kid thing, and then there's this good humor. So
wait a minute, that's another ice cream pun, right?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Pun intended.
Pun intended. Happy accident. There you go. Well, you know what? I hope you don't mind, Dave. I'll put a link to the book.
We actually have a website called Frank TL Frog and Friends.
Okay.
And they can go there, and there's a flip book actually that the puppet Frank and a few of his friends are narrating on each page in a video, narrating the book. So it's very, very cool. And there's a lot of free stuff on there too.
It's like a new edition of the director's cut. Did I hear you correctly? You say you're still performing in Nashville at a club. Where are you? Where can we find you?
Well, my buddy Greg Crow, who I've written many, many great songs with, including Lonely and Gone for Montgomery Gentry, and Bill McCorvey and I wrote. We play at a place called The Local, and it's right here in Nashville, and it's just a really, really cool bar. It's one of the few clubs that really, really, the owner, Jeff Reed, he really loves 90s country music. He loves real country music, and they got a lot of different genres of, the younger kids, some of the older writers, but we always get our friends up to play with us, or whoever wants to come in on Monday nights. So we do this Monday night thing, and we've been doing it for almost 2 years. We had took off for COVID for 2 or 3 months, and then unfortunately, Greg got he contracted COVID, and he's all right now. But it took him about 14 days to get over that, and it really kicked his butt. So everybody, if you get a chance, get your vaccine. I got mine. So
me too.
Anyway, you don't want to get that stuff. Well, I'm getting a lot more offers for shows, and just done a couple of a benefit over in North Carolina, and then we did one in Helen, Georgia. A lot of songwriting things, and I'm planning on doing some stuff down in Texas here real soon. But Monday nights we play here for 2 hours, 6 to 8, and whoever's in Nashville or whoever's visiting here to come see us, it's really a cool little venue and great food. So.
Well, you mentioned the reason how you and I were able to make this podcast happen was Bill McCorvey, and you mentioned that you team up with him and make that happen when he has time to come and join you on stage. For those that don't know that name, that is the voice behind Pirates of the Mississippi, another hot country band out of the 90s. Again, full circle. I'm so glad that you and I have had the opportunity to chat, for me to learn more and more about you. But again, I'm from the admiration side of this. Have been instrumental, no pun intended, with country music of the 80s and 90s, to be an ACM award winner. All of that. And like you said, the fun part was sitting back and watching one of your songs being sung. Does it still give you the same tickle every time you hear your song on the radio by another artist?
Oh man, I tell you, I'm so honored to have moved to this town. I've been here almost 40 years. I am probably one of my writer friends one time told me, he says, Gibson, you are the luckiest man in show business. I said, well, you know something? I don't know about if I'm the luckiest, but I've been pretty fortunate to have met the right people at the right time and had the right song for some reason or another. God gave me a gift to do this, and I can't do anything else. I mean, I can't. I mean, it's just in my soul. You know, ever since I was a kid, you know, it's been there, and thank God I've been able to actually, you know, make a living at this business, because, you know, the business, as we know, the business has changed an awful lot.
So much.
Financially, it's just you've got to have that song on the radio. You've got to have it. So that being said, I won't say anymore. I am so proud. I really am. Thank you, Chris, for being a fan. I mean, without you and all the other folks out there, especially in radio and, you know, everywhere, we wouldn't do what we do.
Well, Jeff Carson and I had a conversation, and I was letting him know that his first single that came out was a tune called "Yeah, Buddy," and it didn't break. I don't think it broke 60 on the top 40 charts. And what I explained was, we didn't care. The audience loved it, and we're going to play it. And he said, exactly like you said, if it weren't people like you in radio doing that, because the listener doesn't know where the song is on the charts, they just know they like the song. So,
right.
And I think that the highway station, just to give you a little glimpse of what I did, every man think about retirement. What are we going to do? Where are we going to go? In what direction? And mine was, I could never find a radio station that played the music I like. It's gone now.
Uh-huh.
And
Right.
that's where the highway station was birthed. When you think about it, some men will spend hundreds of dollars every month on golf. Some will rebuild automobiles. I decided to build a radio station that I want to listen to. And you guys are part of that. So if it takes off the way that I hope that it does, at least you get a couple of more residual checks, and you'll get the admiration that people are still playing your music because they love it. And again, what you did on your own as a songwriter is immeasurable. But I mean, that 3 years that you and Blue were together, you were just phenomenal and will be instrumental of 90s hot country. So when you just said there's nothing else I can do, this is what I do, well, you would be incorrect if you don't mind me putting you in your place for a moment, Dave. You just keep doing what you do. You, the singer, the songwriter, the performer, the author. I can't wait to see what's next for Dave Gibson. Give us a sneak peek. What are you going to do? Make a new album? Maybe design a new car? What's going on?
Well, you know, I'm still writing songs, and in fact, I had a single come out 9/11 of last year, which was actually perfect timing because the song was called World Gone Mad, which was written 2 years before that. Doug Johnson and Nick Sturms and I and Walker Montgomery wrote the song, and it's one of my favorite songs that I've ever had come out. Now, this artist, Josiah Siska, is on Black River, and which Doug is the guy that runs A&R over there, and the song went to social media. I mean, all the streaming platforms, And you know, I don't want to sit here and say sour grapes or anything, but it never went to radio. They never took, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, this song, and I don't know if you've ever heard the song at all. You probably haven't.
I have not.
It's one of the best songs I've ever been a part of. And I thought to myself, wow, what great timing is this? And then all of a sudden it didn't actually get on real radio. So you know what that means. I mean, it's just, radio is actually how we make a living,
right?
These days, because the social, you know, those things, the platforms don't really give you. It's not all about the money, but sometimes it is, you know. But I want you to hear this song, and maybe you'll play it on your show, because Josiah Siska is a young guy. He was on American Idol
right
a few years ago, and he's a real country singer. He's from Georgia. And he's like 21, 22 years old, and the guy is a star. And I'm like, wow, I want this guy to really make it. I've written a couple more songs with him, so you know, I'm very excited about his career. And you might, you know, just check him out. But I will send you that song.
I was gonna ask you if you wouldn't mind just dropping that in either text
Absolutely.
or an email. Send me the MP3. Let's add it to the station broadcast of this podcast. I'd love to share it with people.
That would be great, you know, because people need to hear this song. It's really, really just so a poignant statement about the state of social, you know, the way these years have been, you know, 20, you know, it's just mad. A world gone mad. I was like, wow. There's also a video. You can see it on YouTube.
All right, we'll look for it there.
Him singing it. Josiah Siska.
And he was the one that was on American Idol, correct?
Right. And then he got his deal on Black River. So
next question I would have to ask, now that you've accomplished so many things in your young years here, do people recognize you when they come in the club and they see you on Monday?
Maybe not recognize me, but they recognize my songs.
Gotcha.
I mean, most everybody does. They, you know, a lot of the younger people don't quite remember. That was 30 years ago. It's hard to believe. It's just, wow. Where did the time go?
I know. And it's a long lost era for a lot of people. And again, I think that's why I do what I do. It was just a happier time for me. So you kind of reflect on hot country.
Sure.
The 90s were completely crazy. And when you come through, I mean, let's admit it. The 90s was kind of a weird decade. We got a whole new group of country listeners and country dancers and line dancing and Billy Ray Cyrus. And it was just this Shania Twain. We just had this craziness of crossover. And then, but the older folks, us in our 30s when we were in the 90s, had to deal with the decades prior. So we were able to move through that 70s, 80s, 90s, and into the early 2000s, and it was a different time. And I'm reflecting on what you had said about radio, and that's where your revenue comes from. But boy, I tell you, the things I love the fact that Dave, that you can go out on Monday night and sit on stage and play. I don't remember, and this will be a story there was a gentleman by the name of Larry Stewart, and he was opening for another headliner.
Right.
And I'm sitting in this amphitheater with, 15,000, and Larry Stewart comes out and he starts singing, and people continue to talk and mingle and carry on. And I'm sitting there looking at people saying, do you not know who was on stage right now? And I would say that Larry went through 3 or 4 songs, and I tell you, Dave, the rumble of the people just talking and not giving a crap that Larry Stewart was opening. And then Larry stopped for a moment and he said, what I'd like to do now is play a couple of songs that I did with a band that I was part of. And he got 4 chords into the Bluest Eyes in Texas, and the noise and the mumbling of the crowd stopped. Right. And then he had them hooked for the next 30 minutes. But it took them that long to figure out who. They had no idea that Larry had left Restless Heart and he was out on his own. It's just one of those things where if I walk in and hear somebody playing in a club, I'm going to know because I'm in the biz. And again, here I am rambling while I'm trying to do an interview with you. One of the things about radio of the 70s and 80s, because it kind of changed in the 90s, was DJs always needed reading material, because we have between 3 and 5 minutes of absolutely nothing to do except cue up the next record. Right. So I would tell people we would read the record label, and that's where you would see things like, D. Miller, D. Goodman, D. Dillon. You would wonder, okay, well, who is that? So we knew who were the writers are, and who the producers were, and who the labels were. And again, the listener didn't care. They just knew if they liked the song, they were in.
Right.
And we need to get back to that.
Well, I mean, that's the one thing that is really, right along the time that we came out in 91, I'll tell you, Sony Music and Epic Records they were big time behind us. I mean, it was like they spent, a lot of money, and they did their best. But the problem was 91, I guess what happened then. The radio was deregulated.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, when you could only own 3 radio stations in an area, you could own as many as you wanted to. So all that happened. The big companies came in and conglomerates bought up everything. Now they own it all. And I'm sorry to say this. I guess I'm not sorry to say it. They control the radio airwaves.
Correct.
Whatever you hear out there. And when you were a real DJ, you were a guy that you heard something, you played the crap out of it.
You bet.
And you made it happen. You made singles happen for people because you started a fire. I wish we had that. I do. I really do.
Well, it was one of those things that I like to share that, Chris Ledoux used to sell LPs out of the back of his truck.
Right.
And he needed more and more people. So when you found a country radio station that would play Chris Ledoux, it would be that regional sound. Mm-hmm. I have no problem in San Diego blaring Chris Ledoux. Nobody else would. But him, Mark Sissel, the rest of them, let's make this thing happen. So very popular in a regional, but to have let's just say it, a corporate program director in New York City picking the songs that people are going to listen to in Atlanta just didn't seem right. And that's what happened to corporate radio, and that's what's making little independent radio stations such as ours flourish a little bit. We're playing the music without the influence of some 21-year-old corporate fresh out of college telling us what we should be playing for. You know what I'm saying? So it's a necessary evil. You need bread and butter on the table, so the records still need to play on the radio.
Yeah, and I'm a very positive thinking person. That's not, not that I can't go down a rabbit hole here and there and get a little, upset about what has happened, but I can't. Things that I cannot control, I refuse to let them destroy me.
Very good.
And so I just like, wow, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of this. And that's, in a way, Cheryl and I, we thought the same thing. We've written some really great songs together. We got this puppet show. It's like, something, let's just do something different. Let's write this little book. And we wrote this book, and now we're getting all these great little awards on it and stuff.
Sure.
And we've already got another book that we finished. And I got to use a little bit of my talent that I went to school for. Went to school for commercial art and photography. I mean, back in the day. And I sort of was able to use this really cool program and do it kind of digitally. And so I illustrated the cover of the book and some of the inside. Yeah. Well, I didn't do it all, but I had a younger gal do the characters and everything inside. But I'm telling you, it was so much fun. And so I'm really I love being able to do things that I feel like that I have the talent to do and that I love to do. And I just, music took over my life early on in my career, growing up, moving to Chicago and everything. So I don't know. like I said, I'm a fortunate person to be here, still doing this.
What I'd like to do is first thank you again for taking the time to chat with me and to share some really awesome stories and enlighten me on some of the new music. I can't wait to get a copy of the MP3. One of my favorite songs, I don't know if you have any inside story you'd like to share, but if anybody ever watched the movie The Cowboy Way, you can't miss Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys.
Right.
And that rendition is the Gibson Miller Band. So the next time you see that movie, was it 94 or 95? The next time you go see that movie and you hear the song, understand it's this guy right here, Dave Gibson, and Blue Miller did that for the soundtrack. But is there a story behind that, or did somebody come to you and say, "Hey, can you sing this?"
Well, Sony Pictures did, because we're on the label, so all their artists became artists on the soundtrack. So they wanted a different rendition of Mama's, and we came up. Actually, Blue Miller did it. He came up with a 4/4 version of that song instead of 3/4. It's usually, Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. That, like the Waylon and Willie version.
Right.
Well, we decided to do it 4/4 time. Mama, don't let your babies, in a 4/4 time, which really was just so cool. And we ended up getting to do our video on the Brooklyn side of the Brooklyn Bridge on a barge, and in the daytime, and then at night we were at Times Square. And it was so much fun going up there and doing that. It was wild. It was so wild. And then they used clips from the movie in our video. So with Kiefer Sutherland and
Woody Harrelson. Yeah, Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
and McDermott. Dylan McDermott is the bad guy. So
yeah, isn't that funny? He became a big star. He is.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun seeing that happen. So listen, do me a favor, Dave, stay on the line. But what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this up here. Again, singer, songwriter, performer, author, ACM award winner. If you hear the name Gibson Miller Band, this is the gentleman right here, Dave Gibson. Thank you again so much for taking the time and sharing some time on the Hot Country Podcast.
Thank you, Chris. I totally enjoyed it. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Hot Country Podcast, a presentation of the Highway Station. This episode and others are available everywhere you download your favorite podcast. Just search Hot Country Podcast with Chris McKay. Don't forget to help support the podcast by visiting our sponsors at hotcountrypodcast.com. I'm Chris McKay, and thanks again for listening to the Hot Country Podcast.